The discovery of Göbekli Tepe really shocked the world and completely changed how people think about early human history. No one ever imagined that people who lived as simple hunter-gatherers could build something so huge, complex, and full of meaning. This place, hidden under ancient soil in southeastern Turkey, made many scholars realize that what they thought they knew about the beginning of civilization might be wrong. Göbekli Tepe is much older than other known historical sites. It dates back to the 10th and 9th millennia BC, which means it was built over 11,000 years ago. For many years, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt worked patiently at the site, carefully uncovering the giant stone pillars and strange carvings. He spent decades studying the area. Towards the end of his life, he began to speak more freely about what he believed Göbekli Tepe really was. In his private writings and quiet talks with close colleagues, he hinted that the site wasn't just a place of worship. He believed it might be proof of something far more mysterious and powerful. He thought it showed signs of careful planning, lost ancient rituals, and knowledge of the stars. This connection between faith and science made people question everything they thought they knew. Göbekli Tepe sits on a windy ridge close to the Turkish-Syrian border. The land is dry and empty, and the sun shines hard most of the year. The first time anyone recorded anything unusual about the site was in the 1960s. A group of American and Turkish surveyors found some flint tools and pieces of limestone, but they didn't think the area was important. The site remained forgotten for many years. Everything changed in 1994, when Klaus Schmidt, who was working for the German Archaeological Institute, went to the site. As he walked among the rocks and thorns, he noticed something others had missed. There were giant T-shaped stones just peeking out from the ground. While most people had assumed these were natural rocks, Schmidt saw signs of deliberate design. He believed these stones were part of a large human-made structure. Driven by curiosity, Schmidt started a full excavation project that lasted for more than 20 years. What he found amazed not just scientists but people all over the world. The site had huge limestone pillars, some as tall as 16 feet and weighing between 10 and 50 tons. These pillars had detailed carvings of animals like lions, vultures, and scorpions, as well as symbols that no one has fully understood yet. They were arranged in large stone circles, laid out in a careful and geometric way. But what shocked people the most wasn't just how beautiful or big the site was. It was how old it was. Radiocarbon dating showed that Göbekli Tepe was built around 9600 BC. That was a time when most humans were still living in small groups, hunting animals, and gathering wild plants. According to everything taught in schools, people during that time weren't supposed to be building anything this big or complex. These stone pillars were older than Stonehenge by about 6,000 years and older than the pyramids in Egypt by 7,000 years. The people who built Göbekli Tepe didn't even have pottery, metal tools, or writing. And yet, somehow, they managed to organize hundreds or maybe thousands of workers to cut, carve, move, and raise these massive stones. This raised a huge question: how could people who were supposedly so primitive create something so advanced? As Schmidt dug deeper into the site, he began to understand that what he had discovered was more than just a religious temple. The site didn't have signs of people living there. There were no cooking pits, no homes, no storage buildings. No signs of farming tools. This meant people didn't build Göbekli Tepe to live there. It wasn't a village. It was a special place, a sanctuary built for spiritual or ritual reasons. This discovery was deeply troubling for historians. For a long time, the common belief was that humans first learned to farm, which allowed them to settle down, store food, and then build temples and cities. But Göbekli Tepe turned that idea upside down. Here, it seemed that people came together to build a temple first. Then, maybe because they needed to stay close to that sacred place, they learned to farm. Schmidt talked quietly with other scholars about this new idea. He suggested that maybe it wasn't farming that made civilization possible, but faith. Maybe the need to worship, to tell stories, and to connect with the stars was what first brought people together in large groups. And maybe, in order to stay close to that place of worship, they figured out how to grow food and live in one place. This idea was both exciting and frightening. It meant that our desire to believe in something greater, to share spiritual experiences, and to create sacred spaces might be the very reason civilization began. While the team worked under the hot sun, digging into the ancient earth, Schmidt began to realize that Göbekli Tepe was more than just an archaeological site. It was evidence of a major shift in human thinking. It marked the moment when humans decided to work together and build something bigger than themselves. It showed that belief, not just survival, could change the course of history. In the final years of his life, Schmidt appeared calm and thoughtful as he continued his work at Göbekli Tepe. But in his private notes, he wrote about the strange and powerful mystery of the site. After he died in 2014, some of his unpublished writings were found. These documents showed that he was worried about how the site could have been built at all. In one note, he asked himself if the project was just too big to have happened naturally. He wondered if there had been some kind of central plan, something or someone guiding the construction. The scale of the work at Göbekli Tepe was incredible. The stones had to be cut from quarries, carved with detailed images, moved across long distances, and then raised upright. There were no machines, no wheels, no metal tools to help. It was all done by hand. Some have suggested that there must have been leaders, maybe even early architects or priests, who organized the work. Others wonder if there was a deeper knowledge passed down through generations, knowledge we no longer understand. Schmidt also noticed that the carvings on the pillars might not just be decorations. Some symbols appeared again and again. Some researchers think they could be early forms of communication or even writing. Others believe the images may have had religious or astrological meaning. The people who built Göbekli Tepe clearly had a deep understanding of art, animals, and perhaps even the stars. Some alignments in the stone circles suggest they were watching the sky, tracking the movements of the sun, moon, or stars. If that's true, it would mean these ancient people had knowledge that we once thought came much later in history. As more parts of the site are uncovered, the questions keep growing. Why was Göbekli Tepe eventually buried on purpose? Was it to protect it? To hide it? Or was it part of a ritual to end its use? No one knows for sure. The more we learn, the more mysterious the place becomes. Even though Klaus Schmidt is gone, his work lives on. Archaeologists continue to study Göbekli Tepe, and every new discovery challenges old beliefs. The site forces us to rethink how we see the beginning of human history. Maybe civilization didn't start with farming, but with faith. Maybe our ancestors were more intelligent and organized than we ever imagined. Göbekli Tepe shows us that the past is full of surprises. The people who built it had no modern tools, no writing, and no cities. But they had something powerful, the desire to come together and create something sacred. They left behind giant stones that still stand today, telling a story that we're only just beginning to understand. This mysterious hill in Turkey reminds us that there are still many things we don't know about where we come from. And maybe, the answers we seek are still buried, waiting to be uncovered. Beneath the dry soil of southeastern Turkey, hidden for thousands of years, archaeologists uncovered something that changed everything we thought we knew about ancient people. There, at a place now called Göbekli Tepe, stood massive stone pillars arranged in circles. These weren't just random stones thrown together. Each pillar was shaped like a giant T, with some rising over 16 feet tall and weighing as much as 50 tons. Moving and placing these stones would have been an incredible challenge even today with cranes and machines. But this site was built over 11,000 years ago, long before the invention of wheels, writing, or metal tools. Somehow, people from the Stone Age managed to design, carve, and arrange these enormous stones into what looked like sacred spaces. Each pillar was carefully placed, and many were covered with carvings of animals, symbols, and mysterious figures. These images weren't just decorations, they seemed to follow a shared style, as if they were part of a visual language passed down through generations. What made it even more puzzling was that the layout of the site wasn't random. It was incredibly precise. The stone circles were near perfect in shape, placed with a level of accuracy that would require planning, coordination, and leadership. This kind of work couldn't have been done by accident. It made archaeologist Klaus Schmidt wonder how could small groups of hunter-gatherers, who lived simple lives without chiefs or rulers, come together and build something so complex? Could it be that there was a group of leaders, perhaps a kind of secret elite, Who organized the whole thing? Maybe these leaders had special religious or spiritual authority that allowed them to direct others. Schmidt's colleagues said that although he was very careful in public, using cautious academic terms like ritual specialists or central organization, he would sometimes open up in private. Shortly before he died, he told a fellow archaeologist and a journalist during a quiet moment at the site that Göbekli Tepe wasn't the result of wandering bands of people coming together randomly. Someone had a plan. Someone was in control. And someone had the power to not only build it, but to bury it. That last part is one of the most mysterious. After hundreds of years of use, the people who built Göbekli Tepe made the decision to bury it. They didn't just walk away and let it fall apart. Instead, they filled the enclosures with tons of stone chips, dirt, and debris, sealing the site so thoroughly that it survived untouched for over 10,000 years. Schmidt believed that this burial wasn't an accident or something that happened naturally over time. He thought it was a deliberate act, maybe a ceremony or a ritual meant to mark the end of an era. Maybe each circle had a kind of life cycle. It was built, used for rituals, then killed by burying it. The reasons why this was done remain unclear. Was it out of respect? Out of fear? Had they made a promise they could no longer keep, or did they think the power within the circles was too dangerous to leave exposed? As archaeologists dug deeper, they found even more unsettling clues. Scattered among the stones were human bones, sometimes burned, broken, or bearing cut marks. These weren't normal graves. The bones were mixed in with animal remains, cattle, gazelle, boars. And the animals carved into the stone weren't friendly or gentle. There were scorpions, snakes, spiders, headless human figures, images that seemed to speak of death, transformation, or protection against unseen threats. Some experts began to wonder if this was a site devoted to death, where the line between life and the afterlife was blurred. Others thought the animals might be spiritual guardians, meant to protect the site from evil forces. No one knows for sure, but the carvings definitely seem to point toward deep spiritual or religious meaning. Perhaps the most impressive discovery came not from what was seen with the eye, but what was revealed through technology. Using drones and laser scans, researchers found that the layout of the circles followed precise geometric patterns. These patterns weren't random or based on guesswork, they included equilateral triangles and perfectly spaced alignments. Even the distances between some of the central pillars were almost exactly the same, suggesting that the builders had some kind of mental blueprint. And this was long before writing had ever been invented. There were no notebooks, no maps, no written instructions. Yet these early people held complex designs in their minds and were able to organize teams to build monuments that would last for thousands of years. For Schmidt, this discovery was like uncovering an ancient secret code. It showed that long before humans could write down their thoughts, they were already expressing complex ideas through geometry and space. The design of Göbekli Tepe wasn't just about placing stones, it was about meaning. The layout itself was part of a sacred language. These were not just monuments. They were messages carved into the earth, symbols of belief, community, and shared purpose. To build something this complex, people had to share not only knowledge, but also a vision. That vision bound them together, transforming them from small, scattered foraging groups into a united society. Privately, Schmidt wrestled with ideas that he never published. He feared they were too controversial or lacked enough hard evidence. But in his notes and quiet talks with close friends, he admitted something striking. He believed Göbekli Tepe might be the first example of religion being used as a form of social power. In other words, he thought a small group of people, spiritual leaders, ritual experts, or early priests, may have used belief in the supernatural to gain control over others. Faith wasn't just about comfort or understanding the world. It could also be used as leverage to organize labor, enforce rules, and create a sense of order. People may have traveled great distances to visit Göbekli Tepe, bringing with them goods, stories, and offerings. They might not have fully understood the rituals they took part in, but they followed them anyway, drawn by the promise of spiritual connection. These gatherings may have done more than create spiritual unity. They may have sown the seeds for the first cities. As people returned year after year to the same place, they may have begun to settle nearby. To support these gatherings, They needed food, shelter, and tools. And that might have pushed them to start farming and living in permanent communities. Schmidt often said something that summed up this revolutionary idea: first came the temple, then the city. For most of history, experts believed farming came first. People started growing crops, then formed villages, then built religious structures. But Göbekli Tepe turned that theory upside down. Here was a temple older than any known farm or village. Maybe it was the spiritual urge, not the need for food, that first brought people together. But Schmidt also worried about a darker side. The carvings, the perfect geometry, the burial of the site, they hinted at a system that wasn't just about shared faith. There may have been a division between those who knew the secrets and those who didn't. The people who understood the sacred geometry, who led the rituals, and who made the decisions held power. Everyone else followed. In that way, Göbekli Tepe might have been a model not just for religion, but for control. A structure that helped shape society, using belief to manage and guide the actions of many. After Schmidt's death in 2014, new teams of researchers continued to study the site. Some believed the pillars represented ancestors or spirits, making the site a place of ancestor worship. Others thought it was a place where shamans, spiritual guides, led vision quests or trance rituals to help people deal with life's mysteries like birth, illness, and death. Still others believed the site was built for the stars. Some enclosures appear to align with certain constellations or astronomical events, such as solstices or the rising of Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. In this view, the carved animals might represent constellations, forming a kind of calendar to track time and plan rituals. If true, Göbekli Tepe would not just be a temple, it would be humanity's first observatory. The idea that people over 11,000 years ago understood the movements of the stars is both astonishing and humbling. One of the most famous carvings, called the vulture stone, shows a strange orb floating above the bird's wing. Some think it might represent a celestial body, maybe even the sun or moon. If ancient people really used the sky to guide their actions, it means that astronomy and religion were once the same thing. Watching the stars wasn't a separate science, it was part of sacred duty. It helped decide when to hunt, when to gather, and maybe even when to celebrate. Schmidt never said he believed in this theory, but his private notes show he found it fascinating. He wondered if the pillars might be meant to mirror the stars, turning the ground into a map of the heavens. As new tools developed, scientists started studying tiny details that Schmidt never had the chance to explore. Bone fragments revealed that people ate wild gazelle and other animals around fires that burned for generations. Seeds showed early forms of bread making. Tiny traces of pigment suggested that some rituals might have involved painting or body decoration, details long lost under centuries of dirt. But the greatest potential lies in DNA. If human remains are ever found in good condition, scientists could analyze their genetic material to learn who these people were. Were they all from the same tribe? Did they come from far away? Were they travelers drawn together by a shared belief? If people came from different regions, bringing their own stories and customs, then Göbekli Tepe might have been more than a monument. It could have been a meeting place for early human cultures, a crossroads of shared memory. Most of Göbekli Tepe still lies buried. Ground-penetrating radar has shown that there are at least 20 more stone circles underground, waiting to be uncovered. Each of these could hold new carvings, new bones, and new secrets. Some might contain altars, tools, or even human remains, perhaps the people who built the site or were sacrificed during rituals. Some researchers even hope that one day they might find early forms of writing, symbols that bridge the gap between images and words, a kind of sacred script left behind. For now, excavation is slow and careful. Every stone lifted could change what we know about the past. What Göbekli Tepe tells us is that long before humans had cities, farms, or written laws, they had faith. They had stories, rituals, and dreams. And they were willing to work together, across time and space, to make those dreams real. The site remains a mystery, but it's also a reminder of what makes us human: our need to believe, to connect, to understand the world, and to leave behind something that lasts. Klaus Schmidt may not have found all the answers, but his questions opened a door into the deepest parts of human history. In the stones of Göbekli Tepe, we see not just the past, but the beginning of everything.